The war room aboard the Galactic Council's flagship Harmony had never felt so small. Ambassador Krell pressed his six-fingered hands against the holographic display, watching red markers spread across the star map like a disease. Each marker represented a fallen world, another system consumed by the Vorthon Empire's relentless advance. 73%, muttered General Voss, the Centaurian military commander. His blue skin had turned pale with stress. They have taken 73% of our defended space in just 2 years. Krell's antennae twitched with anxiety. The Altarian Federation had been among the first to fall, his homeworld now a mining colony for Vorthon war machines. Only his diplomatic status had saved him from the slave camps that held billions of his people. The Vorthons fight like machines, said Commander Irol from her floating chair. The aquatic Nereid's gills fluttered rapidly, a sign of deep distress. They do not negotiate. They do not show mercy. They simply consume and move forward. The more assembled leaders of the remaining free worlds stared at the display. The Vorthon Empire had appeared from the galactic rim 3 years ago, their black ships emerging from unknown space like a nightmare made real. They had swept through the outer colonies with mechanical precision, turning entire populations into workers and soldiers for their war effort. "We have tried everything," said Elder Thane, his ancient voice barely above a whisper. The keeper of the archives had lived for 800 years and had never seen anything like this. "Our combined fleets cannot match their numbers. Our technology cannot compete with their weapons. They rebuild faster than we can destroy them." Krell straightened his tall, thin frame. "There is one option we have not explored." The room fell, silent. Every species in the galaxy knew what he meant, but none wanted to speak it aloud. "The humans," General Voss said finally. "The humans," Krell confirmed. Commander Irel's tentacles writhed with discomfort. "They are a young species, barely 500 years in space. What could they possibly offer that we cannot provide ourselves?" "Unpredictability," Krell replied. "Every battle we have fought, the Vorthons have anticipated our moves. They study our tactics, learn our patterns, and adapt faster than we can change. But humans are different." Elder Thane accessed his archives with a thought. The human military consists of approximately 50 million active personnel across their various planetary systems. Their technology is adequate. Their weapons are effective but not superior to ours. Their ships are well designed but not revolutionary. "Then why?" Commander Irol began. "Because they do not fight like us," Krell interrupted. "I have studied their history. When humans wage war, they do not follow the rules we consider natural. They adapt. They improvise. They turn their entire civilization into a weapon when threatened." General Voss pulled up human military records. Their largest single military operation involved only 12 million personnel. By galactic standards, they are a minor military power. "By galactic standards, yes," Krell agreed. "But we are not dealing with a galactic standard enemy. The Vorthons expect us to fight like civilized beings. Perhaps we need to fight like humans." The debate continued for hours. Some argued that bringing humans into the conflict was desperate madness. Others pointed out that desperate madness might be exactly what they needed. The Vorthons had conquered everything conventional wisdom could throw at them. Finally, Elder Thane cast the deciding vote. "We will approach Earth. We will request standard military assistance, 50,000 troops, following established galactic warfare protocols. If they refuse, we lose nothing. If they accept, perhaps we learn something new about warfare." 3 days later, Krell's shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere toward the planetary capital. The blue and green world looked peaceful from orbit, but Krell knew better. Human worlds always looked peaceful until you understood what lay beneath the surface. The United Earth Government's military headquarters was a simple complex of white buildings surrounded by gardens. It seemed almost laughably modest compared to the grand military installations of other species. Krell wondered if this was another example of human unpredictability or simply human efficiency. Admiral Hayes met him at the entrance. The human was tall and lean, with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. His uniform was plain, functional, without the decorative elements that marked military rank in most galactic cultures. "Ambassador Krell," Hayes said, extending his hand in the human greeting gesture. "I understand you have a problem." Krell shook the offered hand, still adjusting to human directness. "Admiral Hayes, the Galactic Council faces extinction. We request Earth's military assistance under the Mutual Defense Accords." They walked through corridors lined with simple displays showing Earth's military history. Krell noticed that humans seemed to commemorate their defeats as much as their victories, something he had never seen in another species. "The Vorthon Empire has superior numbers and technology," Krell explained as they entered a conference room. "We need 50,000 troops to reinforce our defensive lines at the Kepler front. Standard deployment, following galactic warfare protocols." Admiral Hayes listened without interruption, occasionally asking questions about Vorthon tactics and capabilities. His questions were different from what Krell expected. Less about military strength and more about Vorthon society, their supply chains, their communication methods. 50,000 troops, Hayes repeated when Krell finished, following galactic warfare protocols. "Yes, Admiral. We understand this is a significant commitment, but—" "Oh, we'll help," Hayes interrupted. "But I think there's been a misunderstanding about what kind of help you're going to get." Krell's antennae twitched with confusion. "I do not understand." Hayes smiled, and Krell felt a sudden chill. He had studied human expressions, and this particular smile reminded him of a predator that had just spotted prey. "You're thinking about this wrong, Ambassador. You're asking for troops to fight a war. But humans don't fight wars. We solve problems, and the Vorthon Empire has just become our problem." "I still do not understand the distinction." "You will." Hayes stood and walked to a wall display showing Earth's industrial capacity. "Tell me, Ambassador, when the Vorthons conquer a world, what do they do with the population?" "They turn them into workers and soldiers for their war effort." "Exactly. They treat war as a manufacturing process. Build more ships, recruit more. Soldiers conquer more worlds, repeat. It's efficient, predictable, and very effective against enemies who fight by the rules." Krell felt his breathing quicken. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you what's going to happen." Hayes turned back to face him. "In 72 hours, Earth will begin deployment. You asked for 50,000 troops following galactic warfare protocols. What you're going to get is humanity unleashed." The Admiral's words sent a shiver through Krell's entire body. "How many troops will you send?" "Troops?" Hayes laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Ambassador, you're still thinking like a galactic citizen. We're not sending troops. We're sending civilization." Before Krell could ask what that meant, alarms began sounding throughout the building. Hayes listened to his communication device, then smiled that predatory smile again. "Excellent timing. Our deep space sensors just detected a Vorthon scout fleet moving toward the Kepler front. They'll arrive in about 6 days." He looked at Krell with eyes that suddenly seemed very cold. "Just enough time for us to say hello properly." As Krell left Earth's surface, he watched through his shuttle's viewport as the peaceful blue world below began to change. Lights appeared where none had been before. Ships launched from hidden facilities. The planet's entire electromagnetic signature shifted as if some sleeping giant was waking up. He realized with growing unease that the Galactic Council had made a terrible mistake. They had asked for help from humans, but they had no idea what humans considered helpful. As his shuttle jumped to hyperspace, Krell wondered if they had just saved the galaxy or doomed it to something worse than the Vorthons. Behind him, Earth continued its transformation, and Admiral Hayes began making calls that would change the course of galactic history forever. The Kepler front had become a graveyard of starships. Admiral Koss of the Altarian Defense Fleet stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the latest battle reports scroll across his screens. 3 more worlds had fallen to the Vorthons in the past week. The enemy advanced with the steady rhythm of a machine, crushing everything in their path. "Sir," his communications officer called out, We're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. Koss straightened. The humans had arrived 2 days ago and nobody quite knew what to make of them. Put them through. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a middle-aged human woman in a simple gray uniform. Her name tag read Kane, and her rank insignia marked her as a general. Admiral Koss, this is General Kane. We're ready to begin operations. Understood, General. My staff has prepared deployment coordinates for your forces. We'll integrate your 50,000 troops into our defensive. I'm going to stop you right there, Admiral. Kane's voice was calm but firm. We're not integrating with your defensive lines. Koss felt his stomach drop. General, the Galactic Council specifically requested military assistance. They're getting it, just not the way they expected. Kane gestured off-screen. We've brought 200,000 personnel to the Kepler front. 200,000? Koss struggled to process the number. That's 4 times what we requested. Your logistics alone are being handled. Admiral, I need you to understand something. When humans commit to helping someone, we don't do it halfway. The Vorthons have made themselves our problem, and we solve our problems completely. Before Koss could respond, his tactical officer spoke up. Sir, I'm reading massive deployment activity from the human ships. Hundreds of shuttles launching simultaneously. Koss watched his screens in growing confusion. The human deployment looked nothing like standard galactic military operations. Instead of organized military units moving to predetermined positions, he saw what looked like controlled chaos. General Kane, he said slowly, what exactly are your people doing? Kane smiled. Getting to work. On the surface of Kepler 7, the last major world before the Vorthon advance, something unprecedented was happening. Tom Bradley, a mechanic from Detroit, stepped off a human transport and immediately began examining a damaged Altarian tank. This is good engineering, he told. His partner Maria Santos, a former teacher from Brazil. Simple, reliable, easy to fix, but they're thinking too small. Maria nodded, pulling out a tablet that showed intercepted Vorthon communications. According to this, the Vorthons expect us to use these tanks the same way the Altarians do. Direct, frontal assault supporting infantry. Yeah, well, the Vorthons have never met humans before. Tom grinned and popped open the tank's engine compartment. Hand me that plasma cutter. We're going to make some modifications. Across the planet, similar scenes were playing out. Jake Morrison, a programmer from Seattle, sat in what had been an Altarian command post, his fingers flying across multiple keyboards. Beside him, Lisa Chen, a high school history teacher, studied Vorthon tactical reports. Their command structure is completely hierarchical, Lisa observed. Orders flow down from the top, with no room for individual initiative. Perfect, Jake replied without looking up from his screens. I'm already inside their communication network. Basic encryption, too. They probably figured no one would be crazy enough to try hacking them during active combat. They were right about the crazy part, Lisa laughed. But they didn't account for humans. Admiral Koss watched the human activities with growing alarm. General Kane, your people are not following any recognizable military doctrine. They're scattered across the entire planet without proper command structure or defensive positions. That's correct, Kane replied calmly. That's tactically insane. When the Vorthons attack, Admiral, let me ask you something. In all your battles, with the Vorthons, have you ever won? Koss felt his pride sting. We have achieved tactical victories, but you've never won. You follow proper military doctrine, maintain proper command structures, fight according to the rules of civilized warfare, and you lose. Every time. The Admiral had no answer for that. The Vorthons are machines, Admiral. Efficient, predictable machines. They've studied every species in the galaxy and learned exactly how to beat them. But they've never studied humans because humans have never been in a galactic war before. On the bridge of the Vorthon command ship Conquest, war leader Drex studied the tactical displays with satisfaction. The latest human world would fall within days, and then the path to the galactic core would be open. War leader, his intelligence officer reported, we have detected unusual activity on Kepler 7. Explain. The enemy has received reinforcements, a species called humans. Their deployment patterns are irregular. Drex examined the data. The humans had scattered across the planet instead of concentrating their forces. They showed no clear command structure or defensive strategy. This species is obviously primitive. They do not understand proper military tactics. Should we adjust? Our attack plan? No. We will proceed as scheduled. Primitive tactics will not save them. Back on Kepler 7, the human preparations continued. In a converted warehouse, Dr. Emily Foster, a biochemist, worked alongside Captain Rex Miller, a former Marine-turned-farmer. The Vorthans use a standardized atmospheric mix in their ships, Emily explained, showing Rex her analysis. Very convenient for them. Also very convenient for us. Rex studied the chemical formulas on her screen. You're talking about biological warfare. I'm talking about crop dusting, Emily corrected. Just with different crops. Meanwhile, musician David Park sat in a broadcasting station with communications specialist Anna Rodriguez. They were hijacking Vorthon entertainment channels, replacing propaganda with something much more dangerous. Music is universal, David explained as he adjusted his equipment. Every species responds to rhythm and harmony, but the Vorthans have suppressed artistic expression in their conquered populations, so we're giving it back to them, Anna added, her fingers dancing across the transmission controls, along with some very specific suggestions about what they should do with their freedom. The Vorthan attack came at dawn, exactly as their doctrine predicted. Massive ships descended from orbit, disgorging thousands of soldiers in perfect formation. They advanced on the human positions with mechanical precision, and found nothing. The humans had abandoned their scattered positions during the night, vanishing like ghosts. Vorthan forces found empty buildings, abandoned equipment, and no sign of organized resistance. Where are they? War Leader Drex demanded. His answer came from everywhere at once. Human-modified tanks emerged from underground tunnels firing weapons that shouldn't exist. Vorthon communication networks crashed as Jake's viruses spread through their systems. Their atmospheric processors began producing Emily's custom chemical mixtures. Their entertainment channels filled with David's revolutionary music. But the real surprise came when Vorthon soldiers began collapsing not from weapons fire, but from laughter. Lisa had discovered something the Vorthans had hidden even from themselves. Their conquered species had developed a rich tradition of humor, mocking their oppressors. Now that humor was being broadcast directly into Vorthan helmets. General Kane watched the chaos from her mobile command post. Admiral Koss, are you seeing this? The Altarian admiral stared at his tactical displays in amazement. General, this is impossible. Your people are everywhere and nowhere. They're using weapons that don't exist, tactics that make no sense, and somehow they're winning. Admiral, let me explain something about humans. We don't have a military separate from our civilization. When we go to war, our entire society goes to war. That mechanic fixing your tank? He spent his whole life making broken things work better. That teacher studying Vorthon tactics? She spent her career figuring out how people think and learn. That programmer hacking their networks? He's been breaking computer systems since he was 12 years old. Kane paused, watching another Vorthon formation scatter in confusion. You asked for 50,000 soldiers. We sent you 200,000 humans, teachers, mechanics, farmers, programmers, musicians, scientists, people who have spent their lives solving problems. And right now, the Vorthans are a problem. That needs solving. On his command ship, War Leader Drex faced something no Vorthon had ever encountered. Total tactical confusion. His forces were trapped in a battle that followed no rules he understood, fighting an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Recall all forces, he ordered. We will regroup and analyze this new threat. But as his ships tried to retreat, they found their engines sabotaged, their life support systems compromised, and their crews humming strange, rebellious songs that made them question everything they had been taught. The humans had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Vorthon Empire's capital world of Dominus had stood unconquered for 3 centuries. Its black towers stretched toward the stars, monuments to endless conquest and rigid order. But now, for the first time in its history, those towers were. Dark War Supreme Vex stood in his command center, watching the empire he had built crumble in real time. Red warning lights flashed across every display. System after system reported the same impossible message. Total operational failure. Status report, he commanded, though he dreaded the answer. Intelligence Officer Krim stepped forward, his usual confidence replaced by confusion. War Supreme, we have lost contact with 63% of our fleets. Production on 41 worlds has stopped completely. 17 conquered systems have declared independence. How many humans are responsible for this chaos? Sir, our best estimate is still 200,000 humans spread across our territory. But, Krim hesitated. But what? Sir, they are not acting like any military force we have encountered. They appear to be conducting some form of systematic conversion of our empire. Vex felt his jaw tighten. Explain conversion. They are not destroying our infrastructure, War Supreme. They are changing it. Our weapons factories now produce farming equipment. Our propaganda centers broadcast education programs. Our military training facilities have become schools. On the industrial world of Mechanicus, Tom Bradley stood before a massive assembly line that had once manufactured Vorthon battlecruisers. Now it was producing something entirely different. Prefabricated housing units for refugee populations. See, Tom explained to the Vorthon factory manager. The same machines that build weapons can build homes. Better homes, actually, because they're designed to last instead of to destroy. Manager Cax stared at the production line with growing amazement. But we have always built weapons. It is our purpose. Says who? Tom asked simply. The question hit Cax like a physical blow. In his entire life, no one had ever asked him that question. The war leaders, the high command, the empire. And who told them? Tom continued, his voice gentle but persistent. Who decided that your only purpose was to build weapons? Cax struggled to answer. He had never been encouraged to think about such things. I do not know. Then maybe it's time to find out. Tom smiled and handed him a tablet. Here's the production schedule for next week. We're building housing for the Altarian refugees from Zerion Prime. You want to help? For the first time in his life, Cax felt something he had no name for. Later, he would learn that humans called it pride in meaningful work. Meanwhile, on the communication hub world of Nexus, Jake Morrison had achieved something thought impossible. He had hacked the Vorthon Empire's collective consciousness. Every Vorthon was connected to the central network, a system that provided constant updates, orders, and propaganda. Jake hadn't destroyed the network. That would have been crude. Instead, he had simply changed what it was teaching. Check this out, he said to his partner, Ana Rodriguez, the communications specialist. Instead of today's war objectives, I'm broadcasting today's learning objectives. Ana looked at his screen and laughed. You're turning the entire empire into a classroom. Exactly. And the best part is they think it's coming from their own leadership. I've got war leaders across the galaxy accidentally teaching their troops about art, literature, and philosophy. The results were immediate and dramatic. Vorthon soldiers who had never questioned orders began asking why they were fighting. Commanders who had never considered alternatives began exploring peaceful solutions. An empire built on unthinking obedience was learning to think. Dr. Emily Foster had moved beyond individual targets to ecosystem-level intervention. The biochemist was working with local populations to transform entire planets from military installations into functioning societies. On the mining world of Extractus, she walked through tunnels that had once echoed with the sounds of forced labor. Now they hummed with something entirely different, voluntary cooperation. The key, she explained to Elder Vryn, a Centaurian who had been enslaved for 3 years, is understanding that the Vorthons are as much prisoners of their system as you were. But they chose to enslave us, Vryn protested. Did they? Or were they taught from birth that slavery was natural and necessary? Emily gestured to a group of Vorthon overseers who were now working alongside their former prisoners. Look at them now. When given the choice between oppression and cooperation, which do they choose? Vryn watched in amazement as former enemies shared tools and knowledge. They choose cooperation, but why? Because deep down every intelligent being wants to create rather than destroy. The Vorthans just forgot that truth. We're helping them. Remember, the transformation was accelerating beyond anything the humans had expected. Lisa Chen, still working her teaching magic on Xerion Prime, received a message that made her stop and stare. General Kane, she called over her communication device. You need to see this. Kane's voice crackled through the speaker. What is it, Lisa? I just received a formal request from 3 Vorthon war leaders. They want to attend my classes on conflict resolution. War leaders? Not just any war leaders. These are sector commanders responsible for conquered territories. They want to learn how to govern through cooperation instead of force. Kane was quiet for a moment. Lisa, do you realize what this means? It means the Empire isn't just collapsing, it's evolving. But the most dramatic change was happening on Dominus itself. David Park, the musician, had achieved something that no military force had ever accomplished. He had reached the Vorthan capital, not through invasion or bombardment, but through song. His music had spread through the Empire's communication networks, like a virus of hope. Now it was playing in the halls of power itself, carried by Vorthon citizens who had heard it and couldn't stop humming it. War Supreme, Officer Krim reported, his voice shaking. There are crowds gathering in the central plaza. Vex looked at the security monitors and saw something that defied all understanding. Thousands of Vorthons had gathered outside the government buildings, but they weren't rioting or protesting. They were singing. What do they want? Vex demanded. Sir, they want to talk to you. Talk about what? About the future, sir. They want to know what comes after conquest. Vex stared at the monitors in growing panic. His empire was built on the principle that Vorthons didn't ask questions. They followed orders. But now his own people were questioning everything. Deploy security forces, he ordered. Sir, the security forces are in the plaza. They're singing too. At that moment, Maria Santos, the former teacher from Brazil, walked into the command center. She had arrived on Dominus 3 days ago, not as a conqueror, but as an educator. War Supreme Vex, she said politely. My name is Maria Santos. I'm here to offer you a choice. Vex's guards moved to block her, but she raised her hands peacefully. I'm not armed. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to teach. Teach what? Vex snarled. How to be something more than a conqueror. Maria gestured toward the monitors showing the singing crowds. Your people are ready to learn. The question is, are you? Vex stared at this small human woman who had somehow walked into the heart of his empire without firing a shot. You think you can convert me with your alien philosophy? I think you're already converted, Maria replied gently. You've spent the last hour watching your empire transform itself, and you haven't ordered a single orbital bombardment. A true conqueror would have destroyed everything rather than lose control. Vex felt something crack inside his chest. She was right. He had the power to destroy every rebellious world, every singing crowd, every human troublemaker. But he hadn't used it. What do you want from me? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I want you to ask yourself a question, Maria said. In all your years of conquest, have you ever been happy? The question hit Vex like a physical blow. Happiness was not a concept that existed in Vorthon society. Success, efficiency, dominance, these were the only values he had ever known. I do not understand the question. Then maybe it's time to learn, Maria smiled. Your people are already learning. They're discovering that there's more to existence than endless war. They're finding joy in creation instead of destruction. They're learning to hope. Vex looked at the monitors again. The crowds in the plaza weren't just singing now, they were dancing. Vorthon citizens were embracing each other, sharing food, creating art with their bare hands. For the first time in his life, War Supreme Vex wondered what it would feel like to be part of something beautiful instead of something terrible. What happens now? He asked. Maria smiled. Now we teach your empire how to build instead of destroy, how to grow instead of conquer, how to be happy instead of just successful. Outside, the singing grew louder. and the Vorthon Empire took its first steps toward becoming something entirely new. The Vorthon High Command had never called an emergency session before. In 3 years of galactic conquest, they had faced every form of resistance the galaxy could offer and crushed them all. But now, for the first time, War Supreme Vex sat at his obsidian table surrounded by confused and frightened officers. "Explain to me," Vex said, his voice cold as space itself, "how we lost an entire invasion fleet to a primitive species." War Leader Drex shifted uncomfortably. "War Supreme, the humans do not fight like other species. They ignore all established rules of warfare. They target non-military infrastructure. They corrupt our communication systems. They even weaponize entertainment." "Entertainment?" Vex's 4 eyes narrowed to slits. "They broadcast music and comedy directly into our soldiers' helmets. Our forces begin laughing. Some refuse orders. Others ask questions about the purpose of conquest." Drex paused. 3 entire battalions have requested transfer to agricultural duties. War Supreme Vex had lived for 200 years and conquered 47 species. He had never heard anything so ridiculous. "You are telling me that humans defeated our forces with jokes?" "Not just jokes, War Supreme. They turn everything into a weapon. Their mechanics modify our own equipment and use it against us. Their teachers study our psychology and exploit our weaknesses. Their farmers poison our food supplies. Their children hack our defense networks." "Children?" A 12-year-old human named Bobby Smith broke through our primary firewall using what he called basic programming tricks. He left a message saying our security was worse than his school's Wi-Fi. On Earth, the transformation was complete. What had been a peaceful world 3 weeks ago now hummed with the focused energy of a species at total war. Admiral Hayes stood in the Global Command Center, watching data streams from across the galaxy. "Status report," he said to Colonel Park, his chief of operations. "Sir, our deployment is exceeding all projections. We now have human personnel on 47 worlds, 17 space stations, and 6 major shipping routes. The Vorthons are experiencing systematic failure across multiple sectors." Hayes nodded. This was exactly what he had expected. "Breakdown by specialty?" "Engineers are reverse engineering Vorthon technology and improving it. Teachers are developing psychological warfare campaigns targeting Vorthon morale. Farmers are disrupting their food production networks. Programmers have turned their own computer systems against them. Musicians are broadcasting rebellion anthems to conquered populations." "And the artists?" Colonel Park smiled. "The artists are having the most fun. They've convinced 3 Vorthon worlds that their war leaders are actually comedy performers. Morale is at 0%. Meanwhile, on the conquered world of Xerion Prime, something unprecedented was happening. Lisa Chen, the former history teacher, walked through the slave camps where Altarian civilians had been held for 2 years. She carried nothing but a simple tablet and her teacher's instincts. "Tell me about your culture," she said to Elder Morn, one of the Altarian prisoners. "Culture?" Morn's voice was bitter. "The Vorthons destroyed our culture. They forbid our language, our traditions, our stories." "They forbid them," Lisa agreed. "But did they destroy them?" Morn's eyes sparked with understanding. "No. We remember." "Then, teach me, and I'll teach you something the Vorthons never learned." "What is that?" Lisa smiled. "How to fight back." Within hours, the slave camps were buzzing with activity. Lisa had done what she did best. She had turned students into teachers. Altarian prisoners began sharing their suppressed culture with each other, but also with the Vorthon guards who had been forced to watch them. The guards, bred for obedience, but never taught to think critically, found themselves fascinated by Altarian poetry and philosophy. For the first time in their lives, they began asking questions. Why do we conquer? What is the purpose of endless war? Are we happy? At the same time, Tom Bradley was working his magic in a Vorthon manufacturing facility. The mechanic from Detroit had spent 3 days studying Vorthon production methods before implementing his first improvement. "You see," he explained to the confused Vorthon overseer, "your assembly line is designed for maximum efficiency. But efficiency isn't the same as effectiveness. I do not understand the difference. Tom grinned and flipped a switch. The production line began manufacturing Starship engines exactly as designed, but with one tiny modification. Each engine would work perfectly for exactly 37 hours before experiencing catastrophic failure. Efficiency means making things fast and cheap, Tom explained. Effectiveness means making things that actually work when you need them to. The overseer watched his production numbers climb and was pleased. He had no idea that every ship being built would soon become a floating tomb. In space, Jake Morrison had turned the Vorthan communication network into his personal playground. The programmer had not only hacked their systems, but had convinced their computers that he was actually a high-ranking Vorthan official. "Attention all Vorthan fleets," his fake orders read. "New directive from High Command. All ships are to maintain radio silence and proceed to coordinates, deep space. This is a surprise attack on human homeworlds. Maintain secrecy at all costs." Dozens of Vorthan ships dutifully flew off into empty space, where they would spend weeks waiting for targets that didn't exist while burning through their fuel supplies. Dr. Emily Foster had moved beyond biological warfare into psychological terrorism. The biochemist had developed what she called happiness gas, a harmless chemical compound that made Vorthan soldiers experience joy and contentment. "The thing about Vorthans," she explained to her assistant, "is that they've been bred for aggression and obedience. They've never experienced simple happiness. When they do, their entire worldview collapses." Exposed Vortan troops began laying down their weapons and asking strange questions like, "Why don't we have art?" and "When was the last time anyone thanked me for my work?" Some started making friends with their prisoners. Others began writing poetry. But perhaps the most devastating attack came from an unexpected source. David Park, the musician, had discovered that Vorthan military discipline depended on constant propaganda broadcasts. He had hijacked their entire entertainment network and replaced it with something far more dangerous: hope. Instead of propaganda about Vorthan superiority, conquered populations across the galaxy were hearing messages about freedom, dignity, and the possibility of change. More importantly, they were hearing from each other. Altarians spoke to Centaurians. Nereids shared stories with Keepers. For the first time, the conquered peoples realized they were not alone. Rebellions sparked on 17 worlds simultaneously. Not organized military uprisings, but something far more dangerous: ordinary people deciding they deserved better treatment. War's Supreme Vex watched his empire crumble from his command throne. Reports flooded in from every sector: production, facilities failing, troops refusing orders, conquered populations singing seditious songs, ships disappearing into deep space. "How many humans are there?" he demanded. "Intelligence suggests 200,000 deployed across our territory," his aide replied. 200,000? Vex could not believe it. "We have millions of soldiers, thousands of ships, resources, from 100 worlds. How can 200,000 primitive beings cause such chaos?" His aide hesitated. "War Supreme, I believe we have misunderstood what humans are." "Explain." "We assumed they were soldiers, but our intelligence was wrong. They are not soldiers, they are problem solvers. Each human has spent their entire life learning to identify problems and fix them, and they have identified us as a problem." Vex felt something he had never experienced before: fear. "What do you recommend?" "War Supreme, I recommend we negotiate. Surrender before they solve us completely." On Kepler 7, General Kane received a priority transmission from Admiral Hayes. "General, we're receiving communication attempts from the Vorthan High Command. They want to discuss terms." Kane looked out at the transformed planet around her. Human ingenuity had turned a battlefield into a workshop, a laboratory, and a school all at once. Aliens and humans worked side by side, sharing knowledge and building something entirely new. "Terms?" Kane laughed. "Admiral, I don't think they understand. We haven't been fighting a war. We've been conducting an intervention." "An intervention? The Vortans are addicted to conquest. Their entire society is built around it, but like any addiction, it can be treated. Kane watched as a group of former Vorthan soldiers learned to plant crops alongside Altarian farmers. We're not trying to defeat them. We're trying to cure them. The galaxy held its breath as the most powerful military force in known space prepared to surrender to a species that had never fought a galactic war before. But humans had done something no one expected. They had treated war not as a battle to be won, but as a problem to be solved. And they were very good at solving problems. 6 months after the first human shuttle had landed on Kepler 7, Ambassador Krell stood in the transformed capital plaza of Dominus. Where once black towers had stretched toward the sky like monuments to conquest, gardens now bloomed between buildings that had been converted into schools, hospitals, and community centers. The change was so complete that Krell sometimes wondered if he had imagined the old Vorthan Empire entirely. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" a voice said behind him. Krell turned to see General Kane approaching, but she no longer wore a military uniform. Instead, she dressed in simple civilian clothes, a tablet in her hand filled with agricultural reports from across the former empire. "General Kane," Krell said, still struggling to process what he was seeing. "I received your message about the final status report." "Actually, it's just Kane now," she smiled. "My military commission ended 3 days ago. I'm going back to my farm in Iowa. The corn won't plant itself." Krell's antennae twitched with confusion. "But surely Earth needs you to oversee the occupation forces." Kane laughed, the sound echoing off the converted buildings around them. "Occupation forces? Ambassador, there are no occupation forces. There never were. I do not understand." "Walk with me," Kane said, leading him through the plaza where Vorthans and former slaves worked side by side, planting flowers and sharing meals. "Let me explain what really happened here." They passed a group of children, Vorthan, Altarian, Centaurian, and human, playing together while their parents attended a workshop on sustainable farming. Tom Bradley was there, teaching former weapons engineers how to build water purification systems. "You see," Kane continued, "everyone expected this to be a war, but wars have winners and losers. What we did here was different. What do you call it?" "An intervention. The Vorthans weren't evil, Ambassador. They were sick. Their entire civilization was built around a single toxic idea. That conquest was the only path to security. We helped them discover other options." They stopped at a bulletin board covered with job postings. Former Vorthan soldiers were advertising their services as teachers, farmers, builders, and artists. War leader Drex, who had once commanded invasion fleets, was now offering guitar lessons. "But how?" Krell asked. "How did you convince an entire empire to abandon everything they believed?" Kane smiled. "We didn't convince them of anything. We just showed them alternatives. When people are given the choice between creating and destroying, most choose to create. The Vorthans just forgot they had that choice." Across the plaza, Jake Morrison was packing up his equipment. The programmer had spent the last month training Vorthan technicians to use their communication networks for education. Instead of propaganda, his job was done. "Jake," Kane called out, "heading home?" "Yeah," he grinned. "My company offered me a promotion for all the systems integration work I did here. Turns out hacking galactic empires looks great on a resume." Krell watched as Jake walked away, whistling a tune that sounded suspiciously like one of David Park's rebellion songs. "He is just leaving?" "They all are." Kane nodded. "Tom's going back to his garage. Lisa's returning to her classroom. Emily's got a research position at a university. David's planning a concert tour. Apparently, half the galaxy wants to hear the music that brought down the Vorthan Empire. But who will maintain order? Who will ensure the peace continues?" Kane gestured around the bustling plaza. "They will. The people, Vorthans and their former subjects, working together to build something better than either had before." As if to prove her point, War Supreme Vex approached them. The former tyrant looked different, younger somehow, despite his years. He wore simple clothes and carried a watering can, having just finished tending to the memorial garden that honored victims of the Empire's conquests. "Ambassador Krell," Vex said, his voice gentle. "I wanted to thank you." Thank me. Krell stepped back in surprise. For bringing the humans to us. For 3 centuries, I lived in a cage of my own making, believing that conquest was strength. The humans taught me that true strength comes from building, not destroying. Kane watched their interaction with satisfaction. Vex has been working with the Galactic Council to establish reparation programs for conquered worlds. Voluntary programs, funded by converting military resources into humanitarian aid. Krell felt his mind struggling to process this new reality. And the other war leaders? Most are participating, Vex replied. Those who couldn't adapt to the new reality were given early retirement to remote agricultural worlds. They seem happier growing vegetables than commanding fleets. Dr. Emily Foster walked past, deep in conversation with a group of Vorton scientists. They were discussing plans to terraform several dead worlds using biotechnology originally developed for weapons. Dr. Foster, Kane called out, how's the restoration project going? Emily looked up, her face bright with excitement. Better than expected. It turns out Vorthon bioweapons technology is incredibly effective at creating life when you reverse the process. We should have 3 new garden worlds within a decade. After she moved on, Krell turned to Kane with growing amazement. Your people, they're treating this like any other job, aren't they? Because that's what it was, Kane replied. A job that needed doing. The galaxy had a Vorthon problem, so we solved it. Now the job is done, and everyone goes back to their regular lives. They walked to the edge of the plaza where a monument had been erected. It wasn't dedicated to human victory or Vorthon defeat. Instead, it bore a simple inscription, to the power of second chances. Ambassador, Kane said, can I ask you something? Of course. When you first came to Earth, what did you expect to happen? Krell considered the question. I expected you to send soldiers. I expected battles, victories, defeats. I expected a war. And what did you get? Krell looked around at the transformed world surrounding them. Former enemies were sharing meals, children were playing together, and everywhere he looked, people were building instead of destroying. I got something I never imagined was possible, he said slowly. I got peace. Real peace. Not just the absence of war. Kane nodded. That's the thing about humans, Ambassador. We don't just fight wars. We solve problems. And the biggest problem in the galaxy wasn't the Vorthon Empire. It was the idea that conquest was the only way to achieve security. A shuttle descended from orbit, displaying Earth's peaceful blue and white colors. Kane's ride home. Will we see humans in galactic affairs again? Krell asked. Probably not unless someone else needs help, Kane replied, shouldering her small travel bag. We're not interested in ruling anyone or building our own empire. We just want to tend our farms, teach our children, and maybe explore a few more stars. But what if another threat emerges? Kane paused at the shuttle ramp and smiled that same predatory smile that had once terrified Krell. But now he understood it differently. It wasn't the smile of a predator. It was the smile of someone who enjoyed solving difficult problems. Ambassador, let me give you some advice. If another species out there is thinking about conquering the galaxy, they should know one thing. Humanity is still here. We're still farming, teaching, building, and learning. We still turn our entire civilization into a problem-solving machine. When we need to. She stepped into the shuttle, then called back. But we really hope we don't need to again. We've got crops to plant. As the shuttle lifted off, carrying Kane back to her peaceful farm, Krell reflected on what he had witnessed. The galaxy had asked Earth for 50,000 soldiers following established military protocols. Instead, they had received something unprecedented. 200,000 humans who had treated the conquest of a galactic empire as a temporary career change. The Vorthon Empire was gone, but something better had taken its place. A loose confederation of worlds bound together not by conquest, but by the shared understanding that building was better than destroying. And somewhere in the galaxy, other species were learning a valuable lesson. If you ever needed help, you could ask the humans. But you should be very careful what you asked for because you just might get humanity unleashed. In the end, the galaxy hadn't just gained peace. It had learned that the most dangerous species in the universe wasn't the one with the biggest weapons or the strongest armies. It was the one that could turn teachers into strategists, mechanics into saboteurs, and farmers into liberators. It was the species that solved problems instead of creating them. And they were very good at solving problems.